Oh, the intro is not playing here today. Let's start it off. Hey, everybody. Welcome once again to the Road to the Procure Tech Cup. We're really happy to have you this week. This is the show for procurement professionals to learn about the art of the possible with procurement technology. We're really happy to have you here. Episode 16 of the season. So we're going to discuss a very important topic today with our friends at Graphite about how to build deployment plans when you're trying to deploy a supplier relationship management solution. So that's a mouthful, but we will get to defining what exactly that means and how to get the most out of SRM tools because of how you deploy them into your business and into your teams. So before we get there, though, just a little bit of housekeeping as we do every week, just to situate you in the season. So we are February 13th. I don't know about you, but I am getting anxious for the winter to end if you are in the Northern Hemisphere. So we're getting there slowly. We had a bunch of brands and shows come on during the fall, the holiday break, and we're well on our way to the end of April here, where we'll have our Procure Tech Unpacked virtual conference, where we'll have 3 half days where all these partners of the show will come and show you what the art of the possible is with their respective solution categories. So if you are a procurement professional and you're thinking about digitalization in your function, you want to have your leadership team come with you as well, Procure Tech Unpacked is for you. So 3 half days, 100% virtual, no travel. But the whole point is to make you a new best friend in procurement transformation in another business in your industry or in something that's adjacent to your industry, and also get that visibility on the art of the possible. So there will be demos, there will be workshops, there will be keynotes, and you're also going to have the honor of crowning the Procure Tech champions this year. So get your phone ready. I did put it down there as an alert, right? But scan the QR code if you'd be interested. Fill out the survey. I want to make sure that we have a really good set of people that we can have in different various industry groups so that the conversations are really relevant. So I will get back to you on a first come, first serve basis for folks who fill out the survey and want to learn more about attending the conference. Filling out the survey does not, commit you to anything, at least not yet. So that being said, that's the housekeeping behind us. Let's look at this agenda for today. We're talking about building deployment plans for SRM. So let's just level set first. What is an SRM solution? What's a supplier relationship management solution in the scope of our discussion? And then we'll get into a chat, 15, 20 minutes with our friends at Graphite, which I'll let in here in a second, on how to build these deployment plans, right? How do we sequentially deploy our processes, our SRM processes? How do we think about risk and performance management? And there's 3 things we want to cover. Never forget the business case. We'll get into what that means. Eating the elephant one bite at a time. So not thinking too big at the start in those initial deployments. And then what are the long poles in the tent, right? What are the things that are going to be on your critical path to getting to go live with one of these solutions? And then we'll wrap it up here in the interest of being respectful of everybody's time in a half hour. So just before we get into these definitions here, let me bring Luke and Merrick to the call. Hey guys, so Luke, solutions engineer at Graphite, Merrick, head of delivery services. Thanks so much for being here.
Great to be back.
Yeah, good to be here. Thanks.
Yeah, I know, Luke, you're a usual suspect nowadays. Merrick's your first time on the show, right?
First time. Yeah.
Yeah, so really happy to have you. And we'll dive straight into the content because I know we've got a lot of stuff to cover. So right before getting to our discussion here, SRM solutions, right? I bring out this map every week just so we can get situated on what we're talking about. And for me, SRM is really the bottom half of, or the bottom third of our graphic here, where we're really talking about, supporting the whole supplier lifecycle from onboarding to offboarding and everything in between for data management, classification, qualification, risk management, performance management, in parallel to everything we're doing as a procurement department, right? So we might have, in our funnel of suppliers, we have a bunch of suppliers that we end up doing sourcing with, but never end up transacting with. And maybe, for different spend categories or business units. And so we're going to need different types of data in that relationship over time to ensure that we can do the other activities very well. So that's how I think about SRM. I don't know, Luke, Merrick, if you guys, how do you complement that definition at Graphite?
Yeah, no, I would say, I mean, it's interesting because the way it needs to be laid out here is a straight line, but it's like supply relationship management is like a big circle, right? Yeah, you need to get the suppliers in the door, but that's just step one, right? You're constantly, they're updating their data, you're updating your data, you're going through the process of collecting information, performance and scorecards and things, and continually improving your relationships with them, and yeah, eventually offboarding most of the time. But yeah, it's a very important cycle to make sure you're getting the most out of a core piece of your supply chain.
Yeah, and on that note, and I've gotten that comment before, right? This could definitely be a cycle, even the top one, right? Like procurement, we're starting all over again most times, right? And so, but that's a good lead into who Graphite is, right? So I'd love for you to let us know, or to give people a sense of who Graphite is. I know we covered this in a bit more detail on the first show, so there's that QR code at the bottom that people can scan if they want to learn more or get a demo. But I'd love to get a sense of who Graphite is and what you guys are all about.
Yeah. So we're obviously here to talk supplier management. I mean, that's what we do. Where our focus is, and kind of what sets us apart is, we're built on a network architecture. So what that means is suppliers have one place to go to update their information, provide their data, to manage the documentation, everything that their customers need, and that's the Graphite network. So really, how that translates into the capabilities is, this provides a faster and easier way to onboard suppliers, especially if they already have a network profile, right? That you're onboarding in minutes, you're not waiting months to get suppliers on board. We're reducing ongoing support. So you think of, hey, how do we update my supplier's banking information? Or, hey, their insurance is out of date. Graphite's helping maintain that data, updating our customers when that changes, making sure the supplier knows where to go and knows how to do it. So really, it's we have a big focus on data, as the foundation for all of those different types of things you're trying to do with onboarding, with supplier performance, relationship management, and then the ongoing management of the data, which includes a couple things we have in there with like bank fraud prevention and validating tax and address and things like that.
And one of the things that I love from what you mentioned to it, the network effect, but it's not just a buyer focused solution where you have to get all your suppliers on there. Like the suppliers could also proactively go in on the Graphite network and put their profile in there and then direct customers to it, right?
Yeah. We're all about value, right? We want value for everyone involved. So we have a very high incentive to make sure the suppliers are happy, right? And in the network as well.
Awesome. So I think that gives us a good overview of, why we have you guys on the show for this specific topic. And so that leads us into our discussion here, right? How do we build deployment plans for these solutions? So I think everybody gets the problem, which is I have internal data sources, right? I have to gather data as I'm onboarding suppliers for bank accounts or for, different ordering addresses, tax information. And I also want external data that's risk or, the D&B profile or LexisNexis or all this, this different type of data, the sustainability-based data, right? I want to bring all of this together, and then I want to have it at the right point in time in that procurement process to make decisions and to manage risk proactively and to essentially carry out operations as well, right? So we know the problem, but then how do we get from not having that to having that in place? That's what deployment planning is. At least that's how I define it. And so, yeah, I'd throw it back over to you guys, right, in terms of how should people be thinking about deployment planning, especially for SRM solutions?
Yeah. And then I'll start out with, we're going to lay out 3 different challenges. I'll start with first, and Merrick can cover off on the next 2. But this kind of goes back to the conversation we had a few weeks ago around business cases. In my career, I've worked in procurement, buying technology. I have worked implementing, kind of on the supplier side, implementing that technology. And now I work with the sales team really to understand and drive the value of the solution and work with customers to understand that, and through the purchasing process. There's a key when this is all getting going to make sure that everyone is aligned on why are we even doing this? What's the value here, right? If you're the buyer, you're thinking, hey, we have these problems we're trying to solve, and cool, this technology is great and does a lot of things, but we need to solve those problems. Sales need to understand that, right, during that process. But we also, when this transition happens to the implementation team, the buyer might not be the same person that's implementing internally. Sales is not implementing on the kind of the supplier side. So getting all those teams to understand why we're here, what is the value we're getting, what are the current pains, and mapping those together. I mean, without doing that, you're kind of wandering in the wilderness, right? Hey, what's important? Look at all these cool features, and you're going to miss the mark. So we focus heavily on that and making sure it's a very smooth handoff between sales and services, and really any SRM tool that you go with. That's something to keep your eye on, right? Kind of the success criteria and really why you're there, why you're doing business in the first place.
Yeah, and it seems like it seems so self-evident, right? But especially in SRM, because of all those dimensions I just listed out, like you could go in so many different directions with this. And if you onboard a deployment team and everybody's not aligned on, what are those couple of value drivers that were really important for this organization in this context, then I can see how it's very easy to spread out and end up with a toast that doesn't have much butter on it, but it's like spread out really, really thinly, and you don't get much bang for your bite, so to speak, right? So how do you think about aligning that with like change management considerations, right? Because for ROI, I'd want to deploy everything as fast as possible, but it seems like from an adoption standpoint, you also want to be mindful of certain things.
Yeah, and one thing, kind of part of that is what everyone wants to avoid, whether they know it at first or not, is kind of avoiding this lift and shift mentality. It's like, hey, you have all these process flows and everything, and it's like it's really tempting to say, hey, here's what we're doing, let's make it work in the technology. But then you're missing out on all the automation, right? You're just kind of visualizing a manual process. It is helpful, right? To begin with, but if you're not capitalizing on the true automation and what the tool can provide, what the technology provide, you're definitely missing out. And so what we focus on is, it's kind of there at the bottom of the slide is having that core model that the buyer side, kind of who's implementing the technology, can focus on, can rally around, to make sure that all the right stakeholders and people are involved, and we're focusing on, again, those biggest chunks, the most important pieces, without getting distracted by, hey, how did we do it before? Let's understand that, but then let's kind of level up, if you will, with the technology. And that kind of goes into kind of the handoff between, again, on our side, how we see it as sales and services, where I'm coming through and working with Merrick to then get the customer up to speed, and his team, on the professional services side.
Yeah, and you alluded to that core model aspect here, right? Which I think feeds into your second challenge.
Yeah, sure. So let me take it from there. Sorry, my voice has sort of disappeared over the last couple of days. So if I sound like a teenage boy, that's just temporary. But look, I of course agree with what Luke is saying. We work together very closely. My team takes over from what we're able to sell to our customers, right? And I think as part of the transition, what I am looking to do within our organization is to get involved as services as early as possible, to help sort of shape the opinion, help shape the solution as early as possible, but also to understand the value proposition, right? Because I think that is something that should really stay with you, the customer, from the time you buy or subscribe to a software, all the way through, when you're in customer success, account management, and we're working with you on on adoption and growing, right? Not just by buying additional features, but growing with your business and making changes to our applications as part of that. So the value is really, really key here. The core model is an interesting concept because it really applies across a variety of sizes, right? Of organizations. Of course, big organizations, global deployments, number of stakeholders, it's a must, right? Like you cannot deploy a piece of software without having that island, like that core group of stakeholders, the evangelists who will ultimately work with your service provider to define the scope, the critical elements, right? The pieces that are an absolute must to help you phase it out in a way that makes sense for the organization, and who are also able to tell the story of why. Like, why are we doing this as an organization? Why are we bringing in a new system and changing our process, right? Sometimes our customers are looking to us, Graphite, and in my prior positions, it was really no different, to do that for them. And we can do it to a certain degree, but you really have to be, as a customer, part of that process and lead it. So the core model is really, it's maybe not quite the 80-20 rule, right? But define enough upfront that you can then sort of prove in your first wave. You can roll out as a very solid solution that satisfies the 80-90% of your business requirements. And then in a multinational deployment, for example, the subsequent phases should be more a localization work. It should be language changes, translations, processes that pertain to Latin America versus North America, right? So that's the 10-20% of adjustments that you will end up doing as you work your way through the deployment. And what that provides you is really faster adoption, right? The evangelist island gets bigger and bigger because people start seeing value in the solution. And you can also communicate to your management with success, right? Because everybody's eager to get this thing done as quickly as possible, right? I think my boss told me the other day that we need to implement onboard a supplier in 13 minutes. And it's like, okay, we're on it, So, but the point is, speed is key here, right? How do we get you to the value as quickly as possible? And I think the core model will allow us to do that in collaboration with you, defining it in collaboration with you.
And can I, Mario, just try to reinterpret what you're saying in the sense where, the supplier master, at least the way I conceptualize it, is owned by everyone and no one, in the sense where you might have a vendor master in your ERP that
Yes.
master data management owns or procurement owns, but procurement, the vendor master has sustainability, compliance data, all of these other dimensions that are owned from risk and from all these other pieces across the business. And so it can be very overwhelming to try to think about, okay, let's deploy a core model that satisfies everybody's requirements at the start, right? Across all legal entities, across all user groups, all geographies and regulations. Mm-hmm. And if I'm hearing you correctly, when you say a core model, it's like, hey, let's go back, let's go down to what we can champion with the project team in a small and nimble fashion. And we're able to kind of drive that, and it's going to be generally applicable and drive value to everybody in the company here that is concerned by those dimensions. And then we can double back and do regionalization or other dimensions of supplier data on top of that core model. Am I understanding
correct? That? Yeah, no, everything comes down to resources, right? So I like the analogy of boiling the ocean or not boiling the ocean, because the more you can show success early, the more successful you'll be down the road, right? I mean, everybody who is spending money is they want to see why are they spending money and what is the return on the investment. So I focused quite a bit on maybe the global deployments, but the similar applies in your example, maybe with more localized deployments or smaller businesses. Yeah, just realize what your priority is. And centralize yourself around that, right? And maybe break up a 12-month deployment into multiple chunks where you put the core in place, first, right? And to us, that may mean, hey, look, we will not going to integrate with your ERP because that will take a little bit longer to do. But you can already use Graphite in the time while we're building the integration. So you're inviting new suppliers. onto the platform, right? And now you're maybe adjusting the questions that you thought in the design phase will be sufficient. Now in reality, they're not sufficient, right? But the point is, you've got a good starting point, good baseline that you can then build on, with or without Graphite, right? When we disengage from the project, a few months down the road. Correct.
I like it. And I feel like, with your stakeholder graph here, it just means like you want to have the least, like the minimum viable project, the minimum viable amount of stakeholders in that top right corner that you need to manage most thoroughly, because you're, as a project team, also discovering the platform, like discovering what the new reality is going to be. And so you want to control the number of variables in those initial deployments.
Correct.
And that's what allows you to be, to throw the rock down the hill and for it to gather steam and moss by its own afterwards, right?
Yeah, the MVP has sometimes a negative connotation, right? Everybody thinks like, I'm just getting nothing, just the bare minimum. But it really is, it is, the most critical items that you can then, slow and steady build a solution, just like you're building Legos, right? It also starts from the ground up and you end up with a nice little Star Wars spaceship at the end. So
yeah. If I can translate this into the broader SRM landscape, and we talk a lot about onboarding. It's like, that's because that's kind of the front door. It's like, if you don't have, first of all, a place to like even see your data, it's like you're in trouble. How are you going to run like supplier business reviews and do scorecarding, all this cool stuff you want to get the most out of your suppliers, when it's like you can't even onboard them and you don't even know if that's your actual supplier contact? That's a bad actor, right? They're sending emails and it's like, I'm not sure. You got to solve, again, the core and build on top of it. So what's that core value? And then build the value on top of it as you're getting, automating away a lot of the transactional, kind of low value added manual efforts, and then branch out from there.
Yeah. And I feel like that's what allows you to go faster, right? It's counterintuitive, but like the smaller and the slower you start, the more you have like a hockey stick type result at the end, versus trying to do too much at the start and then plateauing and potentially burning and crashing, right? So I think we're probably all saying the same thing here, but I find like it's such an important thing that it's a trap to go like, oh, on paper, business case, we can do everything in a couple months, and like, very, very attractive. But in reality, that tension with change management and the ability to manage all your stakeholders and actually deliver on the design is what becomes the longest pole in the tent. Right. Before we go on to this third challenge here, Panos asked a question in the chat. He says, hey there, a bit late to this. I think you meant maybe to ask this in your intro. How does Graphite complement or complete with the SRM module of larger source to pay suites like Ariba, Coupa, etc.?
Yeah, I can take that one. So again, we've talked a lot about having access to the Graphite network. So suppliers have that one place to go to upload their data that you then need to transact with them. So I think most, if not all of our large enterprise customers, they're using these procure to pay tools. So what we do is help them get the most out of those tools by making sure the data is accurate the first time. It's not a bad actor. It's not going to be fraud. And then maintaining that data over time. So for example, if they're onboarded in Graphite, we validate the bank ownership, we validate the tax information, the address. Hey, that's going to make your P2P run that much better. But then also the supplier needs a place to go in and update that data. And you need that push downstream to P2P, maybe multiple ERP systems. That's what Graphite is here to do, right? So we're helping the supplier keep that up to date. With the network concept, if they do that for someone else, right, you're benefiting from that. It's a community, so that's kind of a whole new value add that we're creating. But it's really the data foundation, right? If you don't get the data right from the beginning, then your P2P is not going to work that well. You're going to have issues, with everything else that's downstream of that.
And to add on to your example, like multi-ERP, I've also seen in complex environments like multi-source to pay suite environments.
It happens,
as well, right? And like those source to pay suites, like the Ariba suite is not built to be the central supplier master record for a Jagger and a GEP and an iValue and an intake and orchestration solution down the line as well, right? So I think that's another way to kind of call out that value of having a centralized SRM solution. Panos has a follow-up question. Who pays for Graphite?
Yeah, so that's funny because I hear this every now and again. And We're strict. We're not going to charge the suppliers. We see that as a big barrier. It's like we're not going to say, hey, to join Graphite, you got to pay up. That's going to cause friction. They're going to get frustrated. They're not going to want to adopt that process and work within Graphite. So, our customers, whoever's, doing the procurement, the onboarding, that's who's paying for Graphite. And then I mentioned this a little bit earlier, and Joel, you alluded to it, is we're giving you all a ton of value with what we provide, but we're giving the suppliers value, not forcing them to pay for it, but that's helping everyone, right? If the supplier's happy, it's helping your product, your data, and it's helping everyone else that's joining the Graphite network.
And there's a couple other questions here, which I'll leave in the chat for now because I know time's flying here, so we can get to the third challenge. If we have time, we can come back to them. But otherwise, I'm sure you'll be happy to follow up with folks after the call.
Okay.
So challenge number 3.
Yeah, real quick here, just in the interest of time. So the third challenge, when we kind of thought about this, it's really has to do with data, right? So in this case, we're highlighting what we call the legacy suppliers. So it's the suppliers that are in your network, in your systems, you're doing business with before you bring on an SRM solution like Graphite, right? So look, and really in any application, data can be your best friend or your worst enemy. Typically, considering how distributed applications are today, bringing data together into one system is usually a big task. And so we wanted to highlight this here from the standpoint of, start work early. Right? So when we engage with our customers, we're certainly working on the configuration of our system to make sure that we capture your requirements, and you can start inviting your new suppliers into your network as soon as possible, as quickly as possible. But at the same time, we also start really thinking about, so what do we do with the hundreds of thousands or tens of thousands of suppliers that you may already have in your network? Where are they coming from? Where is the data stored? What quality is it, right? Is it garbage, or is it in a good shape? Because all that will then determine how quickly we can ultimately create a full picture, full scope data in Graphite, right, for you to use irrespective of whether they're a new supplier or an old supplier. And so we provide services to help you with extracting the data from your systems, help identifying what data what suppliers you may want to include in your Graphite solution, data cleansing, cleanup, right, normalization, etc. All in the effort to ultimately, at the end of the day, provide you with a good, stable base of supplier information that you can run your business with, right, more effectively, faster, collect the latest information, etc.
And so Marek, like if I try to like weave the 3 challenges, right? Like I have my business case at the beginning. I want to be clear on like what are the value drivers, and then design my core model around those value drivers, right? So, concrete example, maybe my master data team is like, I don't know, 20 people manually keying in suppliers to various systems and making sure everything's synced across the board. We have a core model that's going to help me address that from a value standpoint. And I'm going to try to ignore everything else from risk and sustainability and all these other dimensions, because that's where I've got the most value for this first core model deployment. And then to this point, I'm going to look at, okay, well, what are the state of the supplier records from a quality standpoint that support that model, right? Do we have the right contact information? Because at the end of the day, the long pole in the tent is going to be that data quality. Like, are we able to onboard suppliers with the data that we have, or we need to mine new data, call people, go on websites, etc. And then the integration, right? Which is, I think, is a piece you touched on less, but to me is the other key here, right? Like, how many systems am I going to have to connect to with a solution like Graphite?
Distribute the updates, etc. That's correct. Yes. I mean, I think it's it's the integration is obviously key as well, because we're sort of like an engine, right? That collects information and then passes it on to usually the customer's ERP or central system of record, where the supplier data can become transactional, right? Orders, shipments, etc. But again, the focus typically is, and I would encourage you, as an end user in the audience, to really establish the connection and the onboarding process first, right? But the point is, don't forget that there is this large number of data points, elements, supplier information that to really take great advantage of solutions like Graphite, you are best served to clean them, to centralize them, and to make them part of the overall data footprint and the solution.
Cool. Very cool. Yeah, I think that's pretty clear. And then here, I know we're coming up on time shortly here. So as we recap, right, we had 3 challenges, but I kind of translated them into 3 things to keep in mind. So A, the business case, right? So deployment plans are an extension of the business case. And so when you think about the scope of what you're going to deploy, when and which sequence, it's tying it back to that business case realization, value realization, and balancing the realization of those benefits with change management considerations, right? So are there smaller teams, smaller business units where we could get outsized value and they're really supportive of the project? Maybe those are the first type of people I want to hit with the solution versus bigger groups that are going to be less engaged and have less value assigned to them in that business case. Second point was your concept of core model, which I loved, right? So looking at the functionality and the people dimensions, and I kind of just alluded to that with the change management comments, but how can we make something small and nimble over large and comprehensive in these first stages of the deployment, and then double back and keep adding and using those Lego bricks that you referred to earlier, Marek. And then number 3, the long poles in the tent. So what does our data quality look like today? Like, is it going to hamper us in our ability to have speed or to onboard suppliers, right? To have the right people give us the right information. You probably do like a supplier match as well, where you're able to tell people like, hey, we already have a certain percentage of your suppliers on the network, right? And so that you can help them with that, with the network effect. And then system integration, right? Like, what do we absolutely need as integrations for this core model to work in our initial deployments, and what can we use the solution in parallel to integration work and or push down the line, right? So is that a fair recap, guys?
You've been listening. That's good. Very good.
Sounds great.
That's good. So just before we sign off here, as always, on the left-hand side, if you're not following the newsletter, that's where the invite for the show weekly comes out. And we share jobs, must-reads, links that you should be aware of. And we always put out an article on best practices, trends, things that we're seeing in the procurement technology space. And I know, Luke, you guys at Graphite prepared a little something for viewers as well, right?
Yeah, so we have a lot of procurement expertise within our company. So if you want to have a more kind of personalized conversation, we'd love to. We have this concept of an SRM maturity assessment. So if you just want to have a conversation with one of our procurement experts, we're not pushy, right? We're not going to be pushy with you, but it'll just be a good time to sit down and see, hey, what are you doing today? What do we see as kind of benchmarks and where the industry is headed with SRM and kind of where you may have some gaps. And if we can help with that, great. If not, we'd love to just have that conversation. So go ahead and hit that QR code and schedule some time with us.
Beautiful. So thank you very much, Luke and Marek. I know busy times at Graphite these days, so I appreciate you taking the time out of your schedule to come and have this conversation with me on the show. And to everybody watching, thanks again. I know there's some questions we didn't get to in the chat, so we'll make sure to get to them in the actual comments of the event. And we'll see you again next week. Talk to you soon. Thanks so much, guys.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.